Joining me now is Joanne Freeman. She's a professor of history and American studies at Yale University. She's the president of the Society for Historians of the Early American Republic. She is the co-host of the podcast Now and Then and the author of the book Field of Blood, Violence in Congress and the Road to the Civil War. Professor Freeman, it is good to see you. I have to tell you, it was probably 1 a.m. on Saturday. Stephanie Ruhle and I were sitting on TV, and suddenly in the corner of the screen, we saw someone lunge at Matt Gaetz and someone grab, it ended up being Mike Rogers, congressman from Alabama, and someone grab him and pull him back. And then the camera panned over. We're going to see if we can put this on TV. Well, camera pans over to McCarthy, who was walking back to his seat, heard something, turned around and walked back. And we definitely thought we were going to come back and see a brawl on the floor of Congress. And the first thing I thought about is I need to talk to Joanne Freeman.
You weren't the only one, Allie.
What do you make? I mean, it didn't come to blows, thankfully. But that's after 15 ballots, 14 ballots. That's what it looked like. We're going to watch this, by the way, right now. There's the guy coming up. He leans in, and something happens. Somebody pulls him back. What do you make about where we are in our political discourse at the moment?
Well, just as you started out by saying, one of the things that causes these drawn-out speakership battles is indeed fractured political parties. So when you do look back at all of the other times when it happened before 1923, there's that little standout. They are all, as you just suggested, before the Civil War. Parties are much more in flux at that point. And that means you can have moments like this when you can't muster enough people to get what you need to elect a speaker. Now, some of these other times, the way to resolve that was to focus on a specific issue. So, for example, in 1856, they actually asked the top three leading candidates for the speakership to, in the House, publicly state what their views were on congressional legislation about slavery. And they were going to pick a speaker based on what they said at that moment during the sort of pseudo-congressional inquisition. So in those cases, unlike this case, there was something very specific that they were negotiating, that they were talking about, that they were trying to figure out a way around. What's interesting about this situation is that, yes, it's fractured, but in addition, it's more about a party battle within the party than about something specific.
So this is interesting because in the in his speech after he became the speaker, which was at about 1:30 in the morning, McCarthy threw out what I would think is some red meat to the far right of the party, including conspiracy theorists. He said he's going to have an inquisition or inquiry, an investigation into the origins of COVID. Now, nothing wrong with that, but that's generally speaking a scientific inquiry, not a congressional inquiry. And some commentators said to me after that he didn't feel comfortable with that, but he was leaning into the fact that the people who stopped him from becoming speaker for 14 ballots fall into this category. Marjorie Taylor Greene, I mean, kind of conspiracy theorists, far right people. And as speaker, rather than sort of being the leader saying, that's not who I am, you can come to me if you want, he said, I'm going to come up to you as long as I can become speaker.
Well, I mean, like everyone else, I'm watching closely because, of course, the next things that have to happen are the creation of rules, right? They now have to agree on rules. And then as speaker, he will be putting people in committees and offering the chair of different committees to different people. That will be another way to measure some of what you're talking about here, which is where is he taking a stand? How much is he leaning in a direction or offering rhetoric in a direction? We don't know that yet. We can have suspicions. We don't know that yet. But that's what to watch for. I mean, that's what we saw was indeed a battle. And what we're looking for now is to understand who won that battle, how, and what are going to be the implications.
Intriguing, because the selection of a speaker on the 15th vote isn't actually a sign of who won the battle. It becomes very unclear. So we'll have to watch to see how this happens. Good to see you again. Thank you, as always. Joanne Freeman is a professor of history and American studies at Yale University, author of Field of Blood, Violence in Congress and the Road to the Civil War, which is always a great read, but became suddenly relevant on Saturday morning.